everyone, and welcome to episode 30. That is 30 of your favorite YouTube series. I mean, right? Of course it is. You have no doubt in your mind that this is your favorite YouTube series. And why wouldn't it be? Because it's ours as well. We are joined with, we got Anthony and Lloyd today. We've got no Aaron, but that's all right. We'll do this without him. And we're really excited this week. We're literally soaring into this episode, right? Got my first one in already. So dad joke number one with Eoin and Robbie from Tines. So not another demo, as you all know, because you've certainly watched the previous 29 episodes, is us having real conversations with vendors about an area of technology that they cover and what they're doing, minus acronyms, minus PowerPoint slides, and minus marketing jargon. So Eoin and Robbie, that's on you to not give us any of that stuff. The ground rules are, if an acronym is used once, then we can go back to using the acronym because we know why acronyms exist. So to get the first one out of the way, we'll say security orchestration, automation, and response. But as we were talking leading into this, we might flip that whole thing on its ear a little bit. So Eoin, I'm going to start with you, and then Robbie, you can certainly jump in and introduce yourself as well. But since you were one of the founders of the company, one of the things that I love to get an idea about is, what did you see in the security industry that's full of vendors, that's full of products, that you thought you could do better, or a gap that you saw that needed to be filled?
Thank you, Matt. That was a great intro. You did yourself a disservice by saying you were nervous about that intro. Thank you so much. It's really great to be here. First and foremost, I never had any ambition to be a security vendor. Before founding Tines, I spent about 15 years working in InfoSec, primarily in fairly technical roles like IOR, SecOps, security engineering, threat management, threat hunting, etc. In companies like eBay, PayPal, and DocuSign. Loved my job. Working in security was just like the best gig I'd had. It was so much fun. While in DocuSign, I was running a team of like 35 people spread across 5 time zones and was like responsible for everything that wasn't strictly kind of compliance related. My team were incredible security practitioners, knew their jobs inside out, could respond to any type of incident. But as that company was growing and frankly, as our ability to detect malicious behavior was improving, the amount of ops work on my team's plate was also increasing, right? So classic ops work like running down phishing emails, responding to EDR alerts, making sure infrastructure was in compliance. You know the story. And when we benchmarked it, we found that about 80% of my team's time was spent doing something they'd already done that day. That's just like a really disheartening thing for a people manager, but also it just leads to like team churn, human error, etc. As I said, these guys were security practitioners, so they weren't software engineers, and they couldn't write the code that we required to get themselves off that treadmill, to automate the interaction between all the various phishing tools and so on and so forth. Although a handful of them probably could have written a little bit of Bash or Python or something like that to glue some tools together, we didn't want literally the company's most mission critical processes hanging off these scripts that were like written by amateurs, poorly managed, deployed all over the place, weren't being monitored, blah, blah, blah. And so in about 2017, we started looking for platforms, like tools that we could buy that would allow my team, who again knew their jobs inside out, automate their repetitive manual tasks without having to write code. And over the course of like 6 months, we looked at a dozen different platforms, everything from big box shops to like consumer products, and hated every single one of them. Like, couldn't believe how bad these tools were, how expensive they were, and how short of our requirements they would have gotten us. And so being the petulant Irishman that I am, I said, you know what, I can do a better job at this myself. And so quitted my job really to build the product that I wished had been available, right? And essentially that boiled down to a tool, a platform that would allow anyone, regardless of their technical background, automate their own workflows end to end without having to write code. And that's where Tines came from. We if you talk to a Gartner or a Forrester, we would fall into SOAR. So as you said, SOAR is security, orchestration, automation, and response. We have a love-hate relationship with the term SOAR, because if you ask Gartner or Palo Alto or Splunk or somebody like that, hey, what's SOAR? They will tell you SOAR is a collection of like 4 different technologies behind a single pane of glass, right? It's analyst collaboration, it's case management, it's threat intelligence, and it's workflow automation, right? Behind this single pane of glass, kind of these 4 platforms cobbled together to make your SOC more efficient. As one of our customer CISOs, Chief Information Security Officers, likes to say, tell me about a single pane of glass and I'll tell you about a single glass of pane, right? These tools just do not work. And so with Tines, what we do, which is very different to SOAR, is we just do workflow automation. That's it. We are laser focused on workflow. That's been our shtick since day one. And the rationale for that is because, you know, frankly, we believe that most companies already have great case management in Jira, ServiceNow, GitHub issues, whatever. They already have great threat intelligence because they have a sundry of open source and proprietary feeds. And they already have amazing analyst collaboration and Slack and Teams and so on. And what you're missing is that workflow automation piece. So that's where we spend all our time, and we build a platform that essentially allows these frontline security analysts automate their own work without having to write code.
So you mentioned that the code or the platform is workflow automation without code. Mm-hmm. However, there's obviously code in the back end so that you can do the automation. Mm-hmm. How do you keep up on today's quickly evolving technology landscape with new tools, new platforms? It seems like there's a new thing every week.
Phenomenal question. So this gets back to how Tines is architected, right? So when I founded Tines, again, this Northern Star was that a platform that would allow you to automate anything, regardless of the complexity, the use case, or the technology stack. That's what we were trying to build. And so we had to come up with a very different approach to how this platform would work, away from those kind of traditional automation platforms. So what I did in the first 6 months of Tines was I went to all my friends that I'd worked with over the last 15 years, and I said, hey, tell me about your workflows. And so they would give me, a screenshot of a Confluence document, how they do vul management. And they'd send me a Visio document of how to do like EC2 compliance. And they would, oh, that's elastic computing to an AWS. And then they would send me like things like, here's how we do like employee onboarding. So essentially, I collected like 500 of these workflows right across different size companies, different use cases, and so on. I'm getting to your question, don't worry. And what I started to do was I started looking for repeating steps across these workflows, right? What I was trying to do was like determine what's the lowest common denominator of things that we would need to support, right? So rather than looking for like technologies, rather than looking for like interactions or interfaces, I was just looking for things that looked the same. And so I'd be able to say, hey, it's really common in these workflows to need to be able to send an email. And it's really common to need to be able to make decisions. And it's really common to need to be able to interact with some third-party tool. What I found out was that there's actually only 7 types of actions that every single workflow, regardless of what it does or where it's hosted, is constructed of, right? So instead of us trying to play whack-a-mole with all these different tools, what we've built is an automation toolkit that essentially is extraordinarily flexible. The analogy we sometimes use is like, if you're a carpenter, right? You've got a hammer, a chisel, a drill, a saw, a pencil, a penknife, and like a measuring tape. I'm clearly not a carpenter, but it's those 7 tools that allow you to do any job. So it doesn't matter if it's a table, doesn't matter if you're installing a roof, doesn't matter if you're hanging a door. It's always just those 7 things used in slightly different ways. Same thing with Tines, right? It's always just these 7 action types, as we call them, for your automation. And that way, for us, it doesn't matter if our customer is onboarding a new tool, right? Because it's kind of like, well, we don't care what the stack looks like. It's just one of these 7 action types that's going to allow you to talk to that tool. Similarly, we don't care if you need to make some really, really complex, gnarly edge case decision. It's just that action type that allows you to make decisions. So it's a very, very different approach to how other people.
So you build more of a framework than an actual, what's the word I'm looking for, Matt? more of than an actual like not product, but click and go, type solution. Yeah,
for sure. So I think the way we look at it is we're not prescriptive over how you should do security, right? Because as you guys know, the way different companies that may look the same do different things in security is wildly different, right? The way company A, which on the surface looks the exact same as company B, they have wildly different phishing automation flows for various reasons, right? Maybe one was a sufferer of like a compromise at one point, or maybe one doesn't use email, they only use Slack or whatever. And so rather than us being really prescriptive and saying, this is how you have to do phishing, or this is how you have to do vuln management. Instead, what we do is, look, here's this platform that will do anything. Here's how you use it, have at it. So what we have done is essentially build these automation primitives that allows you to do it the way that you want to do it that makes sense for you. I think one of the things that I found it most frustrating about working as a practitioner is vendors coming in and telling me how my program should work. Right? Hey, here's how you should do cloud compliance. It's like, get the hell out of here. You don't have a thing about my company, right? You don't have a clue. And so what we do is, rather than us like telling you how to do things, we come in, we teach you how to configure these 7 action types. That takes about 3 hours. And then we just let you do what you need to do.
So what are some prerequisites, if any, for a software interacting with Tines?
As in like a third-party tool, like a CrowdStrike or a Splunk or something like that.
Right.
Yep. So it has to have some sort of API, right? So whether that's SOAP, REST, GraphQL, it has to have some sort of API. So one of the action types in Tines, one of those 7 actions, is what we call the HTTP request action. And that's the one that you use to talk to those external tools. Right. And so if it doesn't have an API, like if it's some sort of like legacy mainframe or something like that, Tines we're not going to build an integration for that. Right. We're going to tell you, you know what, the better approach is to build some sort of wrapper around that mainframe or that like legacy AP tool, accounts payable tool, and like have Tines just interact with that.
So sorry, I couldn't save you there earlier, Anthony. I couldn't think of the word you were thinking of either. I was also scratching my head, but I do think this brings up an interesting point, because one of the things that I feel has been an issue in this particular space over the years is, people go through a sales process, they get very excited about the automation of things. They purchase something, they find out it's more difficult to implement than what they thought. And then sometimes, I think we lost somebody, post support on, things like it isn't always there. So I guess explain to me a little bit of like, what does that sales motion look like? Like, I'm looking at Tines, I want to do this automation. I need some help getting some basic stuff set up. Plus I need to learn how to use this solution. Plus I might need some help 6 months from now setting up something else.
Right on. Phenomenal question. So back to my point around when we started this company, we wanted to be the vendor we wished we could have worked with when we were security practitioners. And so first thing you do as a vendor or as a security practitioner is you want to be left to your own devices to try out the product in your own time, right? And so one of the things that used to drive me crazy is that in order to actually get hands on a product, I'd have to like engage in some like POC or some even paid POC in some cases, right? Absolutely crazy. And so there'd just be massive obligation right up front for a product that I just wanted to kick the tires off. And so the first thing to know about Tines is that we have a free version of the product that we call the Community Edition. And that's available to absolutely anybody. You can just sign up, no credit card required, no giving your life away, no commitment whatsoever. You just sign up for the Community Edition. And that allows you to automate 3 workflows, 3 production workflows, whether that's phishing automation, whatever you want to do. And so by the time a customer has actually done that themselves, they've already made the decision, you know what, this product is badass. I really like it. Now I'm going to engage in a sales cycle and do a formal POC, which can last 2 to 4 weeks, where we'll really try this out with our own data. That's the first thing. The second thing then is around how we price, right? So this is critical as far as I'm concerned. We've always been huge proponents of like value-based pricing. I think seat-based pricing in security is abhorrent. like absolutely disgraceful. Because what's going to happen is eventually you're going to have a security incident and you're going to need to invite your IT team to the product, and you're going to need to invite AppSec and product security into the product. And all of a sudden you have like a license hike because you're like dealing with an incident. So the way we price in times is through workflows, right? The number of actual production use cases that you have deployed. So for example, the community edition, our free version, you get 3. Do whatever you want with them. And there's probably like 5,000 to 6,000 companies using that version of the product today and extracting enormous value from it for free. Only then do we start charging for it, right? So the base entry price for times is like 10K. And with that, or sorry, 30K. And with that, you get like 10 workflows or something like that. And so you can actually start really small with times, demonstrate value, and grow your usage responsibly over time. Right. So if, for example, worst case scenario, this has never happened, thankfully, you commit to buying times for a year because the POC like was mysterious, or you didn't try out the community edition. Let's just say all of a sudden you've gone into this situation where you bought the product. It's a small entry fee, right? If you're not comfortable with that. And if you're not using the product, that's okay. You're only being charged for the workflows that you actually have in production. And so the good news is that once our customers actually start using the product, because it's such a different approach, it's so much easier to get value, because the way that you automate phishing response is the exact same way that you automate security chatbots, is the exact same way that you automate employee onboarding, is the exact same way that you do full management. And so there's no barrier to entry once you understand the core components. Further to that, we are extraordinarily transparent with like documentation of the product, right? So if you go to hub.times.com, you will find, and I'm not like tooting our own horror, but some of the leading industry documentation for like a product, right? It's all there. You can learn yourself. We also have like multiple on-demand free training videos to allow you to come up to speed in the product, right? So I think one of the reasons that people have such a bad sense of SOAR is because they went through like a quite regimented POC that was driven by the vendor. They were told that they were going to get all this value. And then a year later, it turns out, actually, Christ, this thing is really hard to use. I'm not seeing any value from it. And I've only got 3 use cases deployed.
Yeah, I think that's certainly what I've seen a lot of as well. So I guess to that point, you went into a space that has some pretty heavy hitter competition in it, right? So a lot of big names here that are all tremendous sponsors of our event. So we won't name them by name, but talk to me a little bit about, again, as a founder of a company going into a space that needed something like what you're doing, right? But knowing that you're going up against some real big guns in the security industry. What sort of a mindset do you have to have as a founder? What sort of what's the twist on the marketing of that when you're trying to make some noise in that space?
Yeah, that's another really good question. So I think first and foremost, you need to be kind of a little bit naive, frankly. And I was definitely naive. Like I had no idea that like a one-person company, like we were bootstrapped for the first year and a half, so no external funding, all like customer funded and employee owned for the first year and a half. And so I had no idea that a company like that should have no right to go up against some of the huge security products and vendors, right? I just didn't know that wasn't okay to do, because in my world, all I cared about was the quality of the product and the quality of the experience for the customer. And so, after about 6 months, it was just me at the time, I found myself in a bake-off for like in a Fortune 5 who were evaluating a SOAR platform. And they were evaluating us against one of those huge big box shops that like you're mentioning. Yep. And the bake-off was, hey, we want to do 3 use cases in your product in Times, and we don't want to do 3 use cases in this other product that like, we're pretty sure is going to win, etc. It was almost like a charity inclusion in this bake-off. After a month, the people using Times had implemented 4 of the 3 use cases. So they'd implemented an extra one, and our competitor hadn't implemented a single one, not one. And so I think the mindset that you need to have as a founder in this space is that the best product wins. It's not always the case, right? Sometimes there's politics at play. Sometimes there's like CISOs being brought to like the Super Bowl, but you need to have the mindset that the best product wins. And so we've always been just focused on building a product that adds an unreasonable amount of value to our customers. And when you think like that, everything else comes naturally.
Yeah, good. I like that. Good.
I think one of the biggest struggles with SOAR is selling it to the business, right? Because we understand that it helps remove some of the more repetitive tasks and triage things that we do day to day. But when there's a price tag necessarily assigned to that, it's hard to necessarily translate that value sometimes. Do you guys have any sort of dashboard or tool that helps? Okay, we have this workflow that runs, this many times a month that equals, this amount of hours saved that you can then use to translate to real savings.
Yeah, we do for sure, but also so does like everybody else. I think the difference that like we have is ours is user driven. So again, one of the things that drove me crazy when I looked at these products as a practitioner was the numbers coming out of those calculators were like bananas, right? It was kind of like, you've saved 1 million hours this week by automating this workflow. I was kind of like, what are you talking about, right? It's just like completely farcical and make believe that I could like give this report to like a CISO who'd be like, well done, and give me a pat on the back. And what we do is, again, because it's just these 7 building blocks, we have an option on one of these building blocks, that essentially allows you to define a manual time, right? It allows you to say, hey, this creating a Jira ticket usually takes 5 minutes, so I'm going to add 5 minutes to that. And then we do some calculations based on how many times that action runs and so on. And we give you a nice report that'll say, hey, this week you saved X amount of time. But you can actually rely on it because it's a setting that you configured yourself, right? It's very user driven.
Right. You're not relying on the vendor set whatever it is. Yeah.
Exactly right. Which is kind of like, this is not true. Like, what are you guys talking about? I think the more important or the more macro level question then is like, what is the actual value of these products? Like genuine, like what's the actual value of a SOAR product? Is it the amount of time my analysts are saving? Because that's really cool and that's legitimate. Is it like that amount of time multiplied by the annual cost of an analyst in dollars? Is that how much I'm saving? Or is it like a more tacit cost or a more tacit value around my employees are happier? There is less human error. And ultimately, by automating this low value, low hanging fruit, I'm actually empowering my analysts to go work on higher impact projects that's actually going to have a qualitative and quantitative impact on the risk posture of the organization. Now, your how much time saved is really good, but I think the true tenor of these products is actually more towards that. Right? It's more towards, hey, we're actually changing the way we're working here. And that's a much more qualitative number or qualitative feel than it is like the hours saved.
That's a great answer.
And good
answer. My first time.
See how great these conversations could be. So let's talk a little bit more, and maybe Robbie, maybe here's a chance that you can jump in and introduce yourself, because we like introducing the West Michigan aspect of our vendors as well. So talk a little bit more about the sales process, right? And I think we hit on it a little bit, but is it typically, starting with the free version and moving on from there, or like what is the initial conversation through PO look like? And then maybe talk a little bit about how you guys support people post PO, because that's an often neglected and very important part of the equation as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that we like to say here at Tynes and just in general is you don't take the ball from Michael Jordan. So when Owen's talking, you let him roll. But it's nice to get my swing. So thanks, Matt. No, it's definitely a lot to do with the community version. Again, as you can imagine, going up against some of those bigger players in the space. From a sales aspect, we have to take a little bit more of a proactive outreach in a sense and try and find and sniff out those projects that are either someone who's running an existing SOAR solution that is a little frustrated with the amount of internal cost of maintenance is what I hear a lot. Or if it's somebody who's had a small team and kind of had those barriers to entry in the automation space, like not having those engineering resources who are Python wizards, not having those funds to throw at professional services to build out some of those pre-built integrations. So we're focused on sniffing out some of those projects and not necessarily trying to push people along that path, but get our name and our hat in the ring so that we can get into that proof of concept and let the product speak for itself. Typically after proof of concepts and we work through the PO process, the beauty is today we are focused on, basically my job is net new logo acquisition. And then we have a whole account management team that kind of takes over post-sale and makes sure that we're ushering in the right value to product usage and making sure that workflows are getting set up and that folks are getting value out of the investment they've made.
So Owen, going back, so great points there. That reminds me of something that I think is another something we see a lot of, right? Is that everyone wants to sell their products to the top 10 companies in the planet or whatever. And as an organization, they forget about the small and medium-sized companies that are out there. And I think some of what we're seeing now, right, is the bad actors understand that the small to medium companies are probably much less protected. And if they can infiltrate there, then they have an opportunity to, infiltrate a bigger company that smaller company might be a partner with or a vendor of or something along those lines. So as an organization, one, I guess my recommendation, don't forget the small guys that are out there, right? Because they're important too, but maybe talk from your own personal philosophy as one of the founders of the entire security ecosystem versus just the whales that all the sales team always wants.
Yeah. Just before I can I just tag on to like Robbie's point? Because there's two things we are like unduly proud of in Tynes. One is that we have never lost a customer who's deployed the product in 4 years, right? So it kind of speaks to the value we're adding. And the second thing, our net promoter score, which is kind of like how many people who use Tynes would recommend it to a friend, is 100, right? So everybody that uses Tynes would recommend it to a friend, like 10 out of 10. Back to your other point, I don't necessarily think it's strictly true that every security company wants to sell to like the whales. I think there's a lot of companies that are really happy doing like mid-market, Cloud 500. But I think you're right that the big checks are in those bigger companies. Quite frankly, Tynes isn't the perfect fit for everybody, right? We're not going to claim that it is. There's no silver bullets in security. Some products just aren't going to be a good fit for a mom and pop shop, right? I think the best thing that we can do as vendors and as security practitioners is be candid and honest about the challenges facing small to medium businesses in this world, and also candid and honest about what tools and the order that you should deploy those tools in, right? They're a 50-person manufacturing company. Tynes should not be on the top of their shopping list for like a security product, right? Get your G Suite in order, get your Active Directory into the freaking cloud, like do some hardening of your AWS infrastructure if you're doing that. And then over time, maybe consider automation. But I think part of the problem and part of the bad rep that security vendors get is they claim to be this silver bullet, where it's like, we're going to stop every single breach. Deploy our product. You don't have to worry about it. Security, we got it. And then all of a sudden you get pwned, and it's kind of like, oh, did we say that? And so I think first and foremost is like being candid. The second thing is being genuine about some real low-hanging fruit that these small mom and pop shops and like small to medium businesses can actually get for very cheap, right? Like, hey, maybe you don't need Windows. Maybe a Chromebook is a better shout, right? Because a Chromebook is going to have automatic like malware protection, and you don't have to worry about Windows updates or anything like that. And it's going to be super easy to use and cheap and light and so on. Maybe it's also a case that like, rather than running your own email server or heaven forbid running your own exchange, like go into G Suite, go into O365 and pay the $5 a month per person, because that will have, frankly, as dramatic an effect on your security posture against these bad actors as deploying Tynes.
Yeah, this is a very interesting thing that I believe we're starting to see, and certainly I think based on the last episodes that we've been doing, is there is a new crop of smaller security organizations that actually get it, right? I mean, a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about for a very long time, I think we're continuing to see like this new batch of security companies. I'm really kind of excited about, not not just what we're seeing from a product standpoint, which I think is also really pushing the envelope and phenomenal, but understanding that customer interaction, their place, how all of those interactions matter. So I am hopeful for the future and the direction that just security vendors in general are going, right? Because I think there's a lot of really good young.
I think the point you're making is like so valid, and I think one of the things we're most proud of, and one of the cultural tenets that we try and encourage within the company, is that of like being missionaries, right? Not mercenaries. Like, we're not in this to like make a quick buck. We really genuinely want to help security teams, because as you guys know, like, working in security should be the best job in the world, right? You get exposed to all this bleeding edge technology. You get, like, for the most part, decent budget to try new things. You have like huge amount of respect right across the organization for the most part, but it's really freaking hard, like way harder than it should be. And you know, we did some really interesting research a few months ago, which was around we spoke to like 500 SOC analysts and like asked them how are they doing, essentially, and 64% of them are going to leave their job in the next 12 months because they're burning out. 64%. That's over twice the industry average, right? Despite all the great aspects of working in security, 64% of these guys are quitting in the next 12 months. And we have to do something. Like, we have to do something. And the way you do something isn't by like forcing some crappy product down an analyst's throat. It's by listening to them, letting them play around, and frankly, letting them do what they do best and be creative.
The organizations that I've seen that have the happiest security folks are the ones that their people don't get mired down in all the details of maintaining the systems, but they're actually doing security versus being, you know, product overseers or maintainers kind of thing. So I think that's an excellent point as well. So
yeah, I think like if you talk about like motivation in like the general business context, right? There's various ways to like motivate people. One terrible way is like money, right? Like, don't try and motivate people through like money or cash. That's destined for failure. But like the way we do in Tynes is we use the acronym MAP, but it's our own acronym. But essentially it means like provide a mission, right? Provide a mission that allows you to become a master of your domain, right? That you can become a master of whatever it is you're working on. The second letter, A, is for like autonomy, right? Give people the autonomy they need to be successful. And then finally, give them a purpose, right? Give them a purpose. And so the best security teams, the most motivated security teams have those things, right? They've got the opportunity to become masters in AppSec, SecOps, IOR, whatever it is. They've got a ton of autonomy and they've got a purpose behind the organization. And those three things don't come when you're completely overwhelmed with like shitty manual work. Pardon my French.
It's all good. French, well-spoken here. So, well, this was a fascinating conversation. I learned some stuff today, Anthony. I learned that Eoin, without question, has the coolest accent of anyone that we have.
I'll take it. I will take it.
So bravo on that one. People are going to watch us to the end because they just want to hear more of that accent. I'm telling you.
Hey, well, they can find us at tynes.com. Free version of the product is available. Sign up. You'll get a really nice email from Robbie.
Yeah, we'll make sure that all that stuff is in the comment section as well. You know, I do think, like I said, I'm super excited because I do see a lot of great younger companies coming along like Tynes that are changing the game, that are easier to interact with, that are more customer friendly, you know, solving needs for organizations. So I did forget to ask one question up front though. What does Tynes mean? What does the name stand for?
Oh, that's a question that we get all the time. So I originally had the idea for Tynes in like 2011. Right. It was like I had this vision for what this product could be. And when I used to envision the product, there's a core component in the platform that we call the Storyboard. And essentially that's where you build your automated workflows, right? So you drag and drop these actions and connect them together. But when I used to picture the product, it would look like an upside down fork, right? So it would have like an action at the top. It'd break into like individual like streams and so on. I have a weird obsession with the name of like formal names of everyday things. Like, so I know that an aglet is the name of the plastic part at the end of your shoelace. A tine is the prong of a fork. And so when we used to like think about this upside down fork, tines was like a really natural thing. And I was like loath to name my company like in that classic security trope of like Blaze Tech or, you know, like
or dark something. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Net something.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, guys, I really appreciate you joining us today. This is another fantastic conversation. So we are very appreciative of your time. Everyone that's watching it, go try the free version. Link is in the description. We're on YouTube right now. So remember, like, click the like button and the subscribe button and all that fun stuff that the kids do. And we will see everyone again for episode 31. Thanks, everyone.